All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to Discover. We are at day 2 of Discover. This is our last installment for the year. We'll be back again next year, but this is our last installment of Discover for the year. We have gone through some amazing sessions on iceberg tables, and we've gone through Snowpark container services. So if you're joining us from those sessions, welcome back. And for those of you who are joining us brand new, I welcome you very much to this session. This is on native applications, how you can build native applications on Snowflake. I wouldn't take much of your time because I know a lot of you have already been on this session. Remember, we are talking about some features that are not yet released. These are in private preview. So when the feature is released for general availability, there might be a few changes. It would definitely be better from what it is right now. But yes, we want you to know that we are talking about roadmap items, and there are some safe harbors and disclaimers that we want you to go through. That being said, we did Discover yesterday. Today is day 2. Today is the last day. This is the second last session. We have talked about ingesting data engineering, Snowpark. We've also talked about generative AI and LLMs. And now we are going to talk about applications. We are going to talk about native applications inside of Snowflake. So stay tuned. We'll have Sumit join us in a couple of seconds. Remember, this is a live event, absolutely free. Invite your friends. We highly encourage everyone to ask questions using the Zoom Q&A feature, either on the top of your screen or the bottom. We have an expert panel at hand answering those questions for you. And in case you're wondering where all of these amazing announcements are coming from and what is this Snowday that everyone is raving about, scan this QR code. It'll take you to the resources page. It'll take you to the recording. Just go watch all of these amazing announcements that we have come up with in the past few weeks. And if you have any questions, just reach out to us. Feel free to reach out to me, reach out to Sumit on LinkedIn, and we'll make sure we get all of those answers in for you. I see Sumit has already joined. How are you, friend?
I'm good, Farhan. How are you?
All well, all well. So we have Sumit, who is going to be walking us through building native applications with Snowflake. So this is an amazing session. I request all of you to be attentive and also ask questions in Q&A. So over to you, Sumit.
Thank you, Farhan. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Is my screen visible?
Yes, take it away.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining in, and welcome to the session once again. Quickly going through the agenda, we will go through an overview of Snowflake Native Apps framework. And as you can imagine, there are two sides to the native application. One is that of a provider, the one who has come up with a business idea, has an intellectual property, and wants to monetize that on Snowflake Marketplace. So they want to sell this application which they have built. And then there is a consumer perspective. Consumer is the one who wants to use the application, leverage it for their business, get value out of it, and then they have to pay for it, right? So they want to consume it from the Snowflake Marketplace. So we'll look at both the perspectives on this overview. We'll look at few case studies of how some of the customers and partners have built these native applications. And then finally, we will do a hands-on for running with a native application. All right, so before I get deeper into the native application, I want to take a step back and talk a bit about data application, because native apps is a type of deployment architecture of data applications. Now, data applications are those apps which deal with large amounts of data, complex logic. So they are data intensive, and the primarily work of a data application is to kind of interact with data. So process it, let end users work on it and get the outcomes from that, right? So that's what we mean by data application. There are 3 different architectures to deploy these apps on Snowflake today. There is native app, which we will go deeper into. There is connected app architecture, and then there is managed app architecture. So let me start from right to left. I think that is simpler to understand. When we look at managed app, you can see here that it's end-to-end managed and owned by the provider. So the persistence layer, as well as the processing and interface layer, all sits on the provider side. Yeah. So provider controls and owns the data. The consumer just goes to the provider's portal for the application, works on the data, and gets the output. Yeah, but it's entirely hosted by the provider. So the data is kind of in control of the provider, right? And there are customers who are okay with this architecture. They do not want the overhead of managing anything. So they just want the app provider to manage everything for them, right? And it works well for them. For the provider, it gets them the economy of scale. they can have multi-tenants inside the single app and then cater to multiple customers, right? So it works well in that scenario. There are customers though who would not like the data to be sitting on the provider side. So then you can see the connected app architecture where the persistence layer or the data layer sits on the consumer side. So it's consumer Snowflake account where the data is sitting in. And then the provider has the processing logic and the user interface, which works on that data, right? So data sits in the consumer side. They pretty much own and control it. But then data has to move or go over the wire on the provider side to be leveraged inside the application, right? So again, it works for certain customers where they are okay to let the data flow into the provider app, manage and control it, and then have the insights come from the provider app. But again, there are customers who are not okay for data to go over the wire. They would rather like to have everything sitting inside their account, right? So more sensitive data, sensitive customers, etc. And that is where Snowflake native applications help us keep everything inside the Snowflake account. So if you look at the native application here, all the things are on the consumer side, the data or persistence layer, the processing layer, as well as user interface layer. All of them are on the consumer side, right? And the benefit is that the data is not leaving the consumer account. The application is coming and running inside the consumer account, right? So data doesn't go over the wire. For the provider, the good thing is that any consumer who is sensitive, they have sensitive data, they can just deploy it inside their account, right? And then it's easily available on the marketplace for both the provider and consumer. Now, this is not to say that one architecture is better over the other. All the three architectures have their own pros and cons. And depending on a specific business scenario and a requirement, you might want to pick one over the other. So Native Apps is the new framework which allows customers to keep data and app within the Snowflake account. All this processing and application logic gets encapsulated and executes inside the consumer account. This is currently in public preview and will be going GA soon on AWS. On the other clouds, this will be going into public preview in future soon. Right now, it's in private preview in other clouds. Yeah. So with that, let's go deeper into the native application capability. The native apps framework is essentially about building the application using the Snowflake capabilities, the primitives like Streamlit, UDFs, stored procs, and so on. You build the application and then distribute and monetize via the Snowflake Marketplace. And then the consumers can go and discover the application, deploy it in their Snowflake account, and start making use of it, right? So that's typically what the Snowflake native app framework looks like. And as I said, let's look at it from both the perspectives, the provider as well as consumer side. Yeah. Here are a few examples of some of these native applications, all the way from the clean room, which allows customers to collaborate securely without sharing the PII data, to the connectors, which are available for ingesting data into Snowflake and then working more on top of the data. So there are a bunch of native applications available now. The slide is a little older. There are more apps available now. But I mean, again, you can think of any business idea about how you want to work on a data. And if you have specific intellectual property which you want to monetize, then you can build an app. And if you're a consumer, you can discover a bunch of these apps on the marketplace and start making use of that for your business. So on the provider side, there are three broad steps which the provider is supposed to do: build, distribute, and operate, right? So let's look at the build phase. The provider starts building the application. They have a business idea. They come up with the IP and the code logic to do that. They can use a favorite IDE like Visual Studio, PyCharm, etc. They can bring their CI/CD practices and so on, right? So they can build this in their environment. They develop the application using Snowflake primitives, like using Streamlit for the front end, Snowpark for working on non-SQL languages like Python, Scala, and Java. SQL anyway can run directly on Snowflake warehouses. Data sharing for collaborating with their customers, and then telemetry to capture the billing events and tracing and logging of those application executions, right? Then they test and iterate on that application within their account. So the provider can create an app inside their account from this code logic, which we call application package. And then they test this via an application instance, which they create inside their account, right? So the provider can test, iterate on it. they can share within their same account for internal collaboration. So this is the build side of it. Once they have built it, tested and iterated on it, then the provider can publish it on the Snowflake Marketplace or within the organization. So one scenario can be that I do not want to purely monetize this app, but maybe I have a large organization, right? There is a federated structure, a bunch of Snowflake accounts in my organization, and we want to kind of provide that to internal consumers, right? So this can also be an internal consumption use case where in a data mesh architecture, I publish my app and other consumers just consume that. So that's another scenario here. But you can either use private listing or public listing. Private listing means you share the app to specific accounts only. Public listing means that anybody on Snowflake can basically discover the app and deploy it on their account, right? So today we have 8,000 plus Snowflake customers. Any of them can discover and deploy it using the public listing route. When you do a public listing, then Snowflake reviews the version for security threats and scans the app, and then provides some kind of a tag saying, hey, this app is approved for public usage. If there are any issues, then Snowflake highlights that, and then you have to go through manual review, right? So there is a security scan happening for any app which gets publicly distributed. And then you can choose what kind of billing model you want to come up with. You can also create custom billing events so that you can come up with your own customized billing model. So customers can, providers can charge based on amount of data being ingested, the rows being ingested, the number of queries running on that particular data, and so on. So it's up to you to decide what kind of billing model you want to come up with for that particular application. Now, once this is deployed on the market, it is distributed on the marketplace and consumer has deployed it, then the provider can operate on it in terms of releasing new features and bug fixes. So you can come up with new versions of the same application. You have versions and patches. So versions are typically for major changes. Patches are typically for bug fixes, right? You're allowed to have 2 major versions at this point in time. So you always need to ensure that the app is consistent and compatible with the previous version of the app. On the other hand, patches are not limited. So you can have n number of patches. So you need to ensure that the app is compatible with previous versions of previous patches as well, right? So that's broad difference between version and a patch. You can make the new version upgrade on your side, and then Snowflake takes care of the upgrade on the consumer side. So as a provider, you do not have to worry about when will this upgrade take place for my consumer, right? So you are spared from all that work. Snowflake transparently manages those upgrades and in a non-disruptive manner. So consumers don't face any downtime when the app is upgraded, just like the Snowflake account. So if you today see the Snowflake platform, we keep releasing new upgrades on a weekly basis, but you never have to take a downtime for Snowflake, right? We never ask for a scheduled downtime. So in the same way, we are going to push these upgrades in a very transparent, non-disruptive manner. And then use the logging and tracing framework to troubleshoot these apps. There is also a concept of events table. If you're not familiar with that, Snowflake has come up with the events table concept to capture any events specific on a certain action, and that's called event table. So you can actually capture actions based on certain events inside the event table. So the consumer can share this back with the provider so that they can troubleshoot the app in a better way. So you can also ask the consumer to share the event table back to you with the specific information which is required. Now let's look at from the consumer side, right? We talked about the provider side. How do they build? How do they deploy? And how do they operate on it on an ongoing basis? On the consumer side, the consumer goes to the Snowflake Marketplace and discovers the application. They are searching via a keyword or looking for a particular provider and so on. So they discover it. They can also evaluate this application if the provider allows to use it on a trial basis. So sometimes the provider may say, hey, I'll allow a trial for 7 days, 30 days, and so on. So consumer can evaluate it and then sign up for that particular application. The second part is a purchase and install for the consumer. So once they have tried the app, they are ready to pay for it. They can purchase the app also using Snowflake credits. So if you're a Snowflake customer and you want to buy a Snowflake native app, you can make use of your Snowflake capacity credits towards that as well, right? So you can actually say that, hey, I want to use my existing credits for purchasing this application. And then finally install and deploy this app in your Snowflake account. Once you deploy it, then the application starts to run. Other important thing is that any privileges which this application requires, like the application needs to work on the consumer data, it will specifically ask you for those permissions. And as a consumer, you have complete control on giving those permissions. You can see here on the screenshot that the app asks for certain permissions, you go ahead and grant those, right? So as a consumer, you know exactly what permissions you are providing to the application, and you have control of that all the time. So that's the final part of it. You give permissions to app and then starts to run on your Snowflake account, right? So that's the broad overview of Snowflake native applications. You saw the provider perspective. How do you build, distribute, and then operate on it? And then the consumer perspective of how you discover, purchase, and then set up and run that application. Let's look at a few examples here. So DTCC is a capital markets intermediary body for all the trading operations which happen between the buy side and sell side, between the market participants. They make sure that these transactions are honored and nothing falls through the cracks. So they need to maintain the risk exposure and come up with the portfolios to make sure that all these commitments are honored at the end of the day, right? So they have their proprietary algorithms to take care of these calculations, like what kind of liquidity do you require, what kind of portfolio I need to maintain, hypothetical modeling, and so on. Now, what DTCC does is they do these calculations, but their consumers or the clients do not know exactly how DTCC is calculating it, right? So then DTCC has to communicate to their client that this is the liquidity risk analysis and this is the kind of portfolio we require. So there is a back and forth between DTCC and the client. What they've come up with is they created this Snowflake native application so that this logic can be exposed to the consumer, and then consumer can run this on their data as well as some part of the data which comes from DTCC. So native applications allow you to work on the consumer side data as well as some data which is bundled and embedded inside the application, right? So only the specific rows which the DTCC requires to be shared are shared via the row access policies, and then the consumer can operate the liquidity logic on top of that. And then the final outcome is shared back with the provider, which is DTCC in this case, right? So there is bidirectional data sharing happening here, provider sharing with consumer and the consumer sharing with the provider. But then the business logic gets exposed to the consumer and they run that. One important thing to note here is that while the business logic gets exposed, the consumer does not see the actual code or the IP. The consumer can only execute that the app as an executable, but the actual code behind that is not visible to the consumer, right? So the IP is completely protected for the provider. This is the kind of UI they built in for doing a hypothetical portfolio modeling and so on, right? This is second example of a company called My Data Outlet. They help customers do investment research from number of financial data sources. In this case, you can see there is S&P Capital, FactSet, and Refinitiv data. So before using the Snowflake native application, they were using SQL databases on customer premises, and each of the databases will have separate data source, and the MDO app instance will run on top of that. And then finally, analyst has to kind of work across multiple instances and get the intelligence out of it, right? So more work for the analyst, more work for MDO to deploy this app across different instances, and all of that change management and ongoing maintenance to be taken care of. What they have done now is with the Snowflake native application, they have deployed this inside Snowflake, and Snowflake Marketplace has the data sets from S&P, FactSet, and Refinitiv as well. So all they require is to publish this native app to consumer. The consumer then downloads and deploys this app, and on these market data sets which are coming through the marketplace are immediately available for the app to provide the insights to the analyst. So a lot more simpler for the analyst as well as for MDO to deploy and manage this application. So these are a few examples I wanted to talk about as to some possibilities in terms of the native applications. But again, there is no limit to imagination. You can think of any business idea in form of a data app and come up with a particular logic and deploy that. All right, so with that done, let's get into the actual hands-on lab. I will share the quick start link with you so that you can follow this along in your spare time later, not today. but you can follow this later as well. The quick start is pretty simple, so you can go through that and start making use of it. All right, so let me go ahead and share my my web browser now. I hope my browser is visible and my Snowflake console is visible. Philip, Sarita, if anyone, Farhan, if anyone can confirm that.
Yep, it's visible.
All right, cool. So let me first describe the scenario a little bit, and then we will go through the steps required to build this application. So here is my provider account here. You can see this in_demo19. This is a provider who has built this application. Yeah, and they want to now distribute it on the marketplace. So I'm going to show you the end product and then go through the steps of what we did to make this work, right? So this is your provider side. This is the data application. It is actually telling you that what's the lead time status for certain raw materials, like the finished products like ski goggles and so on, right? So a bunch of things which the data app is doing. The provider has built this, and then there is a consumer side. So this is the consumer account. This particular account, S Tandure, this is the consumer account, all right? So the same application is available to the consumer for them to run and then get the visibility out of the same data application, right? So these are the two sides of the coin, the provider side and then the consumer side of it. All right, so now let's get into how did we do this? How did we build this application? So this is the quick start, by the way. I'm just going to share the link for this in Zoom chat so that, or maybe Phil, if you, Fran, if you want to paste this link, you can paste it in the Q&A. All right, so this is the particular quick start, which you can go through in your spare time as well. So this is what the app does, right? So it basically builds some dashboards, lead time status, raw material inventory, supplier performance, and so on. There are three data sets here: order data, shipping data, and site recovery data. So two of these data sets will come from the consumer account. The order data and the site recovery data comes from the consumer account. The shipping data comes from the provider. So think of it like a supplier who has the shipping data, and they want to share the data as well as the logic of how they calculate the lead time and things like that, right? So you will see how we encapsulate this and then provide it to the consumers. So that's an overview about what the native application is doing. A bit of architecture and concept. This is how the native application work and architecture looks like. So let's say you have a bunch of SaaS providers offering their application code to you, then the consumer can have all of them running on top of their data directly inside the Snowflake account, right? So the provider only maintains, develops the code and then ongoing versions, but the actual execution happens in the customer Snowflake account. Right? So you can see here native app providers, consumers, and so on. So Quick Start talks about that. And then here is the repo, the GitHub repository where the code lies. Again, this is public link, so you can actually access the GitHub link and see all about the code, the library, scripts, the data set, and so on. All right, so this is publicly available to you. Now, if you look at this repository, what we need to do is we need to maintain the same directory structure. So whatever directory structure the GitHub repo has, we will try and maintain the same structure on the Snowflake side, and I'll show you how we do that. All right. So you can see here are the data files. This is just a dummy data because we want to show you load the data and then show you the outcomes from on the data, but this is just dummy data. And then you have manifest.yaml file, you have Python files, and then you have setup.sql, which basically sets up the Snowflake account. The manifest.yaml file is very important one. That is the one which outlines the dependencies the app has, the references to different tables, the artifacts, and so on. You can see here how the manifest.yaml file looks like. There is a label, comments, and which is my setup script. The Streamlit instance for the UI, the tables which are referenced via the application, and so on. So in a nutshell, the manifest.yaml is keeping the metadata about this application. If you want more information about how do you create this manifest file, again, there is a public documentation available. This is how you can create the manifest file inside Snowflake. So there is a complete documentation about the entire native app development, which you can go through later on. All right. So apart from manifest, then we have the code files like the Python files and the SQL files. So this just talks about one of the Python files, which has a UDF for calculating the distance using latitudes and longitudes, and then editing that file. Now, I have done some of this work already behind the scenes to save time in this quick start. But essentially, if I open my Visual Studio environment, you can see here, this is how my VS Code is looking like. So this is my Streamlit Python code for the front end. This is my udf.py, which is creating those UDFs. This is a setup.sql, and so on, right? And then I have two versions, V1 and V2. We will start with V1, and if the time permits, I'll show you how to upgrade the version to V2 as well. All right, so this is how the repo looks like on the local environment. So let's say I built the application, I created the code, SQL code, Python code, and so on. And now I want to create this as a native app on Snowflake account side, right? So let's go through those steps as well. So this is my Snowflake console. This is the worksheet, which I go through. Now, before I start creating the application, since this app is already available, I'm going to go through an uninstall process. So you are going to see it backward, like the app is already installed. I'm uninstalling it, and then I'm going to do it fresh from there. So this is the instance on the provider side. I'm going to go ahead and install this. And then this is the instance on the consumer side. So I'm going to go ahead and uninstall the consumer instance as well. All right. And if I refresh my screen after uninstalling the app, you can see this app is available to me for deploying in my account because this is published by the distributor. So next step I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this application from the listing which has been created. So the app is gone from both provider side and consumer side. And now there is this listing which we have created in the provider studio. I'm going to go ahead and unpublish this listing so that consumers cannot see it. And then I'm going to delete this application, right? I'm doing this so that I can show you how do I do this from scratch. And I showed you the climax first, the end product first, and then I'm going to show you how do we build this from scratch. All right. So if I go ahead on the consumer side and refresh the screen now, you will not see the listing anymore because I have unpublished that from the provider side, right? So I cannot see this anymore. All right. So we uninstalled it, we removed it from the listing, and I'm going to drop this particular application package so that I can go ahead and start creating this from scratch. Yeah. So you saw the instance uninstalled. I dropped it now, and then I will take you through the steps to create this from scratch. Let me take a simple, maybe a Q&A break at this point before I go deep into actually creating and deploying this application, and just see if there are any questions, any doubts before we go deep into hands-on. Farhan, Sarita, any questions you want to push to me?
Just taking a quick look at the chat. I think we can continue along. Let's take a few questions towards the end. Yeah.
All right. That's all right. Cool. So here I'm going to create this application package. So very simple command, create application package. And then you can see distribution can be internal or external. So internal means I can only share it with accounts in my organization. External means I can publish it on the marketplace to any other account as well. I'm just doing it internal because it's a demo here. Once I create the application package, it essentially creates a database. So this is the database it has created for me. I'm going to make use of the database and I'm going to create a schema inside that. Then I'm making use of that schema. Now, the question in your mind could be that all these code files which are there on my local environment, how do I get them into my Snowflake environment, right? And how do I push those files? So if you're familiar with the concept of a stage, Snowflake has stages, which allows you to bring files into Snowflake, right? So we are creating a stage here, and we will bring all the code files into the stage so that we can create our application encapsulation through that, right? So we create the stage, We also create a virtual warehouse so that our application can make use of that, right? So we created the stage area. Now let's go ahead and upload the files from our local environment into that particular stage area. All right. So this is the stage. I'm going to open that. And I'm just going to see if I have any files here. So right now there are no files here. Snowflake has made it really easy to upload files into the stage and the tables. You will see that here. So I'm going to upload my source code here. So I'm starting with V1. And the first one is the manifest file. One important thing to note, as I said, is to maintain the same structure of the directories. So there was a V1 and V2. So I'm going to make use of V1 as a subdirectory inside my staging area. So the manifest gets loaded into the V1 directory, right? Now I'm going to upload remaining libraries here. Again, respecting the path structure here, I'm going to call this V1/libraries so that we are maintaining the path structure. Right, so you can see these files have been uploaded. I'm going to load one last set of thing, which is the setup.sql. And I'm going to put this under V1/scripts folder. So you can see this has been uploaded now. All right, so our code has been uploaded. The SQL, Python, and our manifest files have been uploaded to our code area. All right, let's go to the worksheet again, where we were actually playing around with this SQL, right? So we uploaded the code now. We need some data as well, because the consumer has to, so the provider has to provide some data to the consumer. Also, we need a test data set so that provider can test the application. So we are creating this database called Native App Quick Start DB. Then we're creating the schema. And then we're creating a bunch of tables, the order table and the shipping table, which should be on the consumer side. But for us to test it on the provider, we are actually creating this on the provider account. And then site recovery. So the shipping data will go to the consumer. The rest two data sets will remain locally available to us. All right, so these are the tables we have created, but there is no data inside them. So some of you are familiar with the copy commands, and we can use copy into to absolutely load the data. But then I want to show you how do you upload the data from the UI as well, right? So let me show you that. So this is the table. I have opened that, and I can just click on the load data button here. I can go ahead and upload this data file here. So this is my orders table. This is the orders.csv. I'm going to upload this file. And there are a bunch of options in terms of what's the file format. So we have delimited files. The only thing I need to change here is this double quotes. Rest of it is the default setting. So you can see very quickly we have 1,000 rows uploaded into Snowflake table, all from UI, right? So I didn't have to execute any SQL for that. I'll go ahead and do the same thing for the other tables as well. So this is manufacturing.shipping. I'm going to upload the shipping data here. So another 1,000 rows loaded into the shipping data. Yeah. And let's finally look at the site recovery table. If a site is not available, how long will it take me to get the supply from other place, right? So that's a site recovery data set. And again, this is the only setting I need to change. So these are 249 rows. So we have loaded some dummy data into our tables so that we can share with consumer and also test the application locally over here. All right, so I'm going to close this app. Cool. So we have the data now in the tables. Now we are going to create some shared content. This is the data which provider wants to make available to the consumer, right? So if you're familiar with the data sharing concept, you share the data via data share. But in the concept, in the context of native application, you create a particular schema and then provide permissions to application as a share so that it becomes available to the consumer. So this is the database I'm going to create for the shared content. And I'm creating a view here. You can see this is manufacturing shipping view. All it does is does a select star on my underlying manufacturing shipping table, right? So the same content, but it is available in the content schema now, shared content schema, so that I can provide permissions to my application on that, right? So I'm granting usage on the schema to a share in application. This is how we provide permissions to the app on the content which needs to be shared, and share reference usage, select on view permissions to the application, and so on. All right. So we provided the permissions required to the application. Then we are gonna create the particular version, which is the V1 version of this application package. This is the time when it is going to look at the code. So all the code which we uploaded, when we add a version, this is when Snowflake tries to create, tries to bring all of that into application encapsulation. Yeah. So you can see it says V1 and patch 0. And now in order for my consumers to access this version, we're going to set this as a default release directive. So release directive allows us to set a particular version as a default. So whenever consumers discover the app on the marketplace, they can actually use that particular version by default. Right? So we have set that up as a release directive. Now I'm going to test this application locally in my environment. So I'm going to go into the particular database schema and then creating an application instance. So all I'm doing is creating the application instance from the package using version V1 patch 0. So this is called as a development environment, dev mode, because I as a provider is going to test the application in development mode. I will run, iterate on it, and so on. There is also a debug mode available. So you can alter the mode as a debug mode so that you can get more functionality on it as a provider. All right. So our application instance has been created now. And these are the packages which we have. These are the applications which we have, and so on. All right, so we got a V1 of our application created and deployed inside my provider account. If I now go to my apps part of the UI, you can see that this application got installed. And if you see the packages, because I'm a provider, you can see this is the package I have. I can go click on the package. You can see there is a V1 here, patch 0 here available. All right, if I click on this application, it should now start running in my provider account. I just want to test how the application is working. And you can see the Streamlit UI is working now. It's performing certain steps like connecting to the server, loading Streamlit application assets, and so on. And you will notice that it asks me for permissions on my tables. So it's saying that, hey, I need permissions on this orders table in order for me to work. So you go ahead and say, hey, yes, I'm okay to give you permissions. It's asking permissions on another table now, which is the site recovery table. So it asks you permissions only on the 2 tables, not on the 3rd table, because the 3rd table is already inside the application schema, because that's a shared content, which we got from our shipping table, right? So it doesn't ask you for permissions on the 3rd one, because that's coming directly from the application schema itself. So you can see the app instance is working for me now on my provider account. I will go ahead and create a listing now so that my consumers can discover and consume the application. So I'm creating this listing here inside the provider studio. I'm going to call it Native App Quick Start. I'm going to select only specified consumers because it's a private listing. And I select the package as the listing content. And I'm going to do some description here. Here is how you add the consumer accounts, right? So you have to follow the pattern called organization.account name, right? So if you're familiar with this, you know that Snowflake has org structure and then there is an account name, right? So you can follow that particular format to add the consumer accounts. In case you're creating a public listing, you don't have to worry about this. This will get published to all your consumers automatically. So you can see my listing is live now. It's available to S. Tandure in the organization SFSE APAC. So now I come to my consumer side. So this is the consumer account, SFSE APAC S. Tandure. I go and refresh my apps side. I can see that this application is available for me to deploy. It asks me which warehouse I want to make use of it and what do I want to call it, application instance, right? So I go ahead and then click on get. It starts to deploy the application on my consumer account. All right, so it's saying installing. I also have my email ID given here. So once the application is installed, I get an alert saying your application is installed and ready to be used. So let me go to quick start by the time this gets installed and see any other steps which I should explain here. So I talked about the code files, making it part of the installation script, which is the setup.sql. So this is the installation script, and you kind of add that function here. All of that has been done already. And then if you recall, I created the application package by using create app package command. And then I went into the particular database and schema to create the stage on which we uploaded the code files. Right. So this explains you how we upload the code files onto the staging area. Then we created the tables for uploading the dummy data. So we had manufacturing shipping table, and then we uploaded the file using Snowsite. Of course, we could have used the copy into command as well, but we chose to use the UI route here. And then we added data to the application package by using the shared content schema. And then we gave permissions to the share inside application package. All right, so these are the steps we have followed already. And then we created a particular version. We could have done this from the UI as well. This quick start tells you the UI steps, but I actually ran this through SQL commands, right? So you have both options, use a UI or use a SQL command. Then uploaded the test data on remaining tables, and then tested the application by creating the create application instance here. So now I'll go ahead and see my consumer account and see if this app has been installed already. And you can see the app is installed in my consumer account. This is my consumer account, right? I can go ahead and click on it. And now the consumer account is running this application. There is particular data set which is internally inside the application package, but then there is data on the consumer side which the application requires access on. So it's asking the permissions on the consumer account that please provide me permissions so that I can make use of this data. All right, so that's one table, and then I'm gonna just refresh it once. And it asks me permissions on the other table as well. So you can see these two tables are coming from my local consumer account, but the third table content comes from the shared content schema inside the application package. And now this application is working on the consumer side. All right, so we deployed the application and it's up and running on my consumer account. I think all in all, it took us maybe about 20 minutes to go from scratch to deploy and get it up and running on the consumer account. Of course, the code was already written. So that's the part where you kind of put your IP into the application code, but then the rest of the steps were pretty fast, simple, and straightforward. All right. And if you see the quick start, you don't see these steps over here. These steps are something which I followed additionally to show you how the end-to-end flow looks like from the provider to the consumer. So you can consider this as a Diwali bonus. We have Diwali coming up. So this is an add-on, how to create a listing, how do you show this to how do you discover this on the consumer account and then deploy it. All right. I have one more bonus because we have some time left. And that bonus is how do I create a new version of this application. All right. So I'm going to close some of these tabs. And I'm going to go to my worksheet where I was actually creating this, right? So this is my quick start worksheet. What I'm going to do now is do a version 2 of this application. All right. So I'm going to upload the code in version 2 folder. And if I go inside my data and my app package was under native app quick start package, this was the stage. I'm going to upload a V2 version of the code now. So I'm going to browse and say, hey, this is the source code. This is the V2 code, the manifest file, and I'm going to put this under V2 folder, right? So I'm going to follow the same structure, just like my V1 structure. All right. And then we have libraries here. V2/libraries. You can see how quickly we are able to perform some of these steps. So the UI is also very intuitive. And then finally the scripts folder where I'm going to upload my setup.sql. All right. So that completes my V2 version code, the manifest, libraries, and scripts, and so on. So I'm going to go ahead and then upgrade my application to version 2. So I'm going to say, hey, add version V2, and then create a particular label. All right, so it's going to create a V2 version of my application. It's looking at the code content now, and it creates a version 2. If I run a show version command, you can see the label which I added. You will notice that there is also a comment which I did not specify in my command, but that is visible. How is that coming is from the manifest file. So if you go and open the manifest file, you will see that there is a comment here, the first version of the application, and this is my V2 where we have this comment. So it automatically picks this up from the manifest. All right, now I'm going to run an upgrade process as a provider. I want to upgrade my application to V2. And this is because I'm on the provider side, I'm doing this manually. But if you're a consumer, you don't have to do this. The moment I set my default release directive as V2, the consumer application gets automatically upgraded to V2. All right. But because I do not have time here, we need to wait for some time for the V2 to get propagated to the consumer. I'm doing a workaround. I'm going to do this manual upgrade on the consumer side. And there is a typo here. See, I'm probably not in the right schema here. So native app quick start. I think I had a typo here, there. So I'm just going to do an upgrade here. So this was my version 1, and this was where are my ski goals. The only change I have made is I've changed this title a bit in the V2. That's all the intellectual property change I have done there. So let's see, when I refresh my browser now, I should see the V2 version of this application. And you can see that my title has been changed. It says, please tell me where are my ski goggles. So now my instance is running from the V2 version instead of V1. Right? And same thing should happen on the consumer side as well. So if I go to consumer side and go ahead and click on the applications and run this, you can see that the title has been changed here. So it's running from V2 version. All right. So you saw how I was able to upgrade the version from V1 to V2 on the native application. All right. So that's all I did from the worksheet side. You also have some of the things which you can do from the UI. So this is the UI, and you can see this is the package. There is a V1, there is a V2. Earlier, you could see only V1, and this is the V2. So you can see the manifest file. You can see here, you have options to add a patch via the UI as well, right? And it doesn't allow me to add any more versions because I can only have 2 major versions. So that's why you can see only V1 and V2. Otherwise, I should see an option called add a version there. All right. So I can go ahead and drop this, but then it tells me that this is being referenced right now in the release directive. So I cannot drop the V2 version of this, right? So it prevents you from dropping the latest version as well over here. All right, so I think we're close to the 1 hour mark, and we have some time to take questions as well. Farhan, Sarita, any questions you want me to take?
Right. So there's one question here from Kunal who asks, how long does this process take? How long does it take to finalize app review?
Usually the app review process is fast. So if my distribution is external, I can expect that to happen in few minutes. It's an automated security scan. Only if the application fails the security scan, that's when it goes to the manual review, right? So the automated review is pretty fast. Again, if you want more information about this, you can actually refer to the documentation here. It talks about running the automated security scan here. So it talks about what are the security requirements, how do you open this for security scan, and so on. So I can show you actually, if I change this distribution to external, So now I'm changing my distribution to external because I want to make it a public listing. And now if I run this show version command, it says review status is in progress, right? So if I run the same command after a few minutes, you will see this review status is approved. And I was doing the test before I came to the webinar, and I could see that this took probably maybe a couple of minutes to move into the approved stage. Any other questions, Farhan?
All right. I don't think we have a lot of questions here. I'll once again, I'll encourage everyone to ask questions. I know this is a lot to take in. There are a lot of resources. We've already shared the quick starts guide with all of you in the chat. If you don't have that link, just let us know. We'll share it once again. But just remember, there are a lot of resources on snowflake.com. You can go to quickstarts.snowflake.com to explore all of the available quick starts that we have. There is learn.snowflake.com and community. So if you want to join chapters and, if you want to be a part of the community here in India or in the, in the region that you're in, just let us know and we'll send out all of these resources. I know there were some questions on the session being recorded or not. Yes, it is. We'll be sharing the link to the recording with you in a couple of weeks. As Sunit said, he gave you a Diwali bonus as much as we could. And post Diwali, we'll share some of these resources with you. So just bear with us for some time, and we'll share these resources. In the meantime, so if you want to take this,
yeah, just to recap, what you saw is how do we build native application using Snowflake capabilities. Then you distribute and monetize via Snowflake Marketplace, and then finally deploy the application in consumer Snowflake account while the provider has full control of their intellectual property. So that's a summary of native application framework. The data doesn't have to move out consumer Snowflake account, so complete security on the data side. Here are some of the links on the resources which Farhan and team will share with you. So the quick start, which I was referring, there is also a tutorial, which is another, you can treat that as another quick start. So you want to play around with one more example. The tutorial goes through that step by step. The documentation, which I was referring to, there is also bootcamp videos where you can go from conceptual understanding all the way to the detailed deep dive of native application. There is a user forum where you can ask questions around if something is not working and you want some troubleshooting assistance. There are other customers who are also there on the user forum, so you can get the questions answered. And the entire commands reference of whatever I was running, the application package, the create application, and all of that is available. So I can quickly show you how those web pages as well. So this is the quick start, the GitHub I was talking about. This is the additional tutorial, another bonus. So this is another tutorial you can follow all the way along, like creating the application files, creating the package, uploading the files, adding the logic, data content, and so on.
If you're sharing a browser window, it's not visible. So
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Is it visible now?
Yeah.
All right. So this is another bonus tutorial I was talking about. So you have the entire step-by-step process, what you need to follow in terms of creating the application files, the package, uploading it, adding the logic, and so on. So it goes through, this tutorial has the publish and install instructions as well. So this is more complete. Yeah. And then there is this complete documentation page for the developer. So this is the developer documentation reference, and on the native apps, you can refer to this particular section. And then you have the bootcamp, which is the native app bootcamp. And you can see all the way from introduction of the native apps all the way to monetizing the native app. Bunch of videos available here, and they are not long. So you probably need a couple of hours to just go through all of them together. This is the forum. This is the community where you can raise questions and so on. Yeah. And then the SQL commands reference for entire native application framework is available over here. So in a way, this docs.snowflake.com is your Bible, or whatever you like to call it. All the documentation around Snowflake platform and various capabilities inside this docs page. Right. So the developer section is over here. And there are other things around Snowpark API, Snowpark ML, etc., etc. So that's complete resources run through. And I think I was trying to show this Visual Studio, which was not visible to you on screen because I was sharing only my browser. So this is the VS Code, and you can see all my files here, the Python files, the SQL files, the manifest file, and so on. This was the comment I was referring to, and various references, the logging level, tracing level, and so on. Right. So this is how the actual code files look like. All right. Any other questions before we wind up?
There is one question from Kunal who asks, what is the upfront fee a provider has to pay to Snowflake to publish the app?
You basically you need a Snowflake account. So you will need an account to develop this application, and whatever credits are required in order to develop and test the application, that's the only thing you require. There is no bare minimum fee. We encourage you to sign a capacity contract with us, which can be as minimum in size as you want. And you need to sign up as a provider. So basically you need to be part of the partner program so that your applications can be published and available to the consumer. So there is a bit of sign up process required. And hence we encourage you to become part of the capacity contract. But again, there is no minimum credits required. It can be as minimum as required for you to get the application up and running, test it, and then publish it to the marketplace.
All right. Once again, everyone, as Sumit said, the Snowflake documentation is your friend, your closest ally. If you want to learn more about the platform and all of the other things that it has to offer, just go to the documentation. It is a treasure trove of information. You'll find everything in there. If you're not able to get your answers through the documentation, reach out to us. You can reach out to Sumit on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me. You can reach out to any one of us, and we'll connect you to the right people and teams that will be able to get those answers for you. I think with that said, we are
a few more questions which Sarita is going to answer live, so I can take them up. I think we have a good amount of time left. So
yes,
there's a question on sharing the resource links. Yes, we are going to do that. We're going to share. There's a question. There are lots of capabilities in Snowflake. If I had to define Snowflake, how can I define this? A database, a data cloud platform, or what? I think that's a very good question. I think 5 years ago, if you had asked this question, most of the people would have answered that it's a database. It's a data warehousing, and there is a Snowflake acts as a database for data warehousing, right? So you create a data warehouse on Snowflake. That was the answer maybe 5 years back. But all the founders had the vision to develop this into a much holistic data platform. And that vision was there from day one. And the step one was to create a warehouse which was simple to use and which could cater to big data and all types of data, all types of workloads. So if you see in the last several years, what Snowflake has added is all different types of workloads. So it's not just a data warehouse, data lake, data science, data engineering, and data applications. If you look at data apps in particular, the data is pretty much meaningless if we don't interact with it in a simple manner from a business user standpoint, right? The data is just a bunch of tables and so on. But it is the applications which provide the end user the power and ability to understand and interact with the data. And hence the data apps become very powerful part of the overall workload spectrum, which Snowflake wants to address. Yeah, so it has evolved into a much more holistic platform. And now the terminology we use for it is data cloud, because you're kind of collaborating on the data and application on this entire super cloud called Snowflake. So it's another layer on top of the cloud on which you got all the data content, you got all the application content. There is a side of provider which are publishing, creating, and then there is a side of consumer which are consuming and leveraging it for business purposes and so on. So it's a networking effect. The way to look at it is this is becoming like a cloud in itself, a super cloud on top of the normal public clouds, where you create a network for data and applications. You get your insights with all the analytical workloads, and you basically collaborate and get more and more value from your data. So the only term, one summarized term is data cloud. But if you distill it down, it is consisting of various workloads like data warehouse, data lake, data science, data apps, and all of that. And then if you look at it from a persona standpoint, you have data engineers, data scientists, data analysts. So all those personas you can imagine in the entire data spectrum. So single platform for multiple data use cases is what I would say.
Great. There is one more question from Kunal who asks, on top of that, the Snowflake keep a margin.
Yeah, so
I
don't have the, I mean, it's a very minute number. I don't have the exact number. On the data sharing side, we don't charge anything, but for the apps, there is a small margin. It's in lower single digits. We can get you the exact number, but there is a small margin kept by Snowflake. So it's not 15%, it's much lower than that.
Yeah.
I can see 22 questions have already been answered by Sarita. So I think I can see quite a bit of them have been already answered.
Yeah. There's one more. There's one more question that has just come up from Gautam, who asks, "How are these data apps different from these visualization tools, such as Tableau?" And that's a very good distinction. That's a great question, Gautam.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say visualization tools are a kind of data application. You can think of BI tools as a kind of data application, right? Because all they are doing is working on top of data, giving you insights, giving you visualizations from that. But the data apps is not just about visualizing the data. It's also about running whatever logic I want to run on that. So it's not just about giving the visual rendering of the output, but let's say I have a proprietary algorithm, like in case of DTCC, they had a liquidity exposure logic which they were running on it, right? And which they wanted to expose. Or it could be a machine learning or LLM application as well. So I think I forgot to talk about LLM, and I think some of you might have been there in the container session before this. You can pretty much create an entire LLM app on top of the data saying, hey, how do my end users interact with the data? It might be unstructured data, it might be structured data, but I want to create an application to allow them interacting with the data, right? So you can build LLM, AI, ML apps as well. Ultimately, the data apps allow the end users to interact with the data, see the output, run some proprietary algorithm on it. So I would say data apps is more holistic compared to visualization tools. You can even think of the ingestion like taking data from sources, bringing it into Snowflake. So if you look at native connectors, they are also native apps. Now they are not doing any visualization. All they are doing is they are talking to the source and bringing data into Snowflake. But we still call them as native application because they are operating on data. They're operating on top of Snowflake directly. So I would say the spectrum of data apps is little larger than just the visualization tool. And visualization can be one type of data application.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. There is one question from Raman who asks, do you support a freemium model for new apps? Idea is margins start kicking in when we see consumption. So I'll let you take a stab at this, Sumit.
So I think the way I look at this, and probably the way I understand this, is the freemium model is more for the provider to come up with. So like I said, there is, for example, they can come with a trial period and say, hey, I will not charge you for 7 days or 15 days. I will charge you only after a certain period of time. So the provider can come up with the freemium model they want to do. They can say, hey, I will allow maybe 1,000 queries to be free of cost. Only after 1,000 queries, I'm going to charge you for this. So it's up to them how they want to monetize that and come up with the freemium model. Yeah. So absolutely, the provider can do that.
Yeah, and just so you know, Ramana, just so you know, we support different types of pricing models. So if it is freemium, where we are providing limited entry level offer, for a basic level of service. This could be for students or developers, researchers that are exploring the data. Freemium is a model that we support. We also support fixed fee model. Wherein your data and information is not changing over a very long period of time. So we support fixed fee as well. There is subscription-based models wherein if there is continuous use, you want to have your consumers subscribe to your data. We can support that as well. And of course, there is usage-based. So rather than an upfront fee or a periodic payment, the consumer would pay at the time of use, and then by either a human intervention or through an application or through an algorithm, we'll step in, and then you'd be able to get that usage based fee as well. So just so you know, we support all of those pricing models. Of course, if you want to know more information about this, we can definitely have you speak with our marketplace leads. They'll have a lot more information on this, but just so you know, we are very flexible on the pricing strategy. So be it freemium, be it a fixed fee subscription, or a usage-based model, we support all of that. And then, of course, it depends on the target audience whom you are targeting. As Sumit said, a part of it also depends on the consumers that you will be targeting. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. And like I said, like the provider can come up with any kind of monetization model. The Snowflake is just a platform for them to put that model on the marketplace. So the pricing model is available on the marketplace and consumers consume it. So it could be per month basis, per query basis, mix of multiple things and so on. So it's totally up to the provider to come up with a particular monetization model.
Great. Let's see if we have any more questions. I think we are almost done with this. First off, I really want to thank you, Sumit. You've covered not only native applications, but also given everyone a really nice Snowflake Diwali surprise. So thank you so much for that. What we're going to do now, I'll just want to apprise the audience of what's coming up next after Discover. This is the session after this is the last event, the last session that we have for Discover. This is our last installment of Discover for the year. So I'll just tell you what we are going to be doing next, where we are going to be next. And if you want to meet with us in person, where to find us, where we'll be, and all of that information will be in there. So first, let me thank Sumit. Once again, thank you so much for this session. There were lots of great questions, and I know this is a new topic for the audience, and we uncovered a lot of sort of myths around applications, and we sort of created a definition around how we define applications. What kind of models do we have? The managed app, the connected app, the Snowflake Native app, how all of that differs. So we have covered a lot of ground in this session. I'll like to share my screen real quick, let everyone know that this is coming up. Build is our developer focused event. It's happening virtually on 5th and 6th of December. So if you want to join us in here, we'll do a lot of hands-on demos, labs and such. So if you want to join us and learn more about LLMs and Gen AI, please do. And we'll see you very soon. Of course, we have a lot of friends here for you at Snowflake. That is quick starts, learn and training. So if you want to get certified, get some upskilling done, education done. So we have all of those resources up and ready. If you are from India and you want to become a part of a community that meets up quite regularly, we are going to be meeting next month. If you're in Delhi, Bangalore, and Pune, you can join the chapters, the user group chapters for these 3 cities. And if you're joining this session from Korea, Singapore, or any other place, even from Japan, we have established chapters in your country. It possibly could be in your city as well. So go to community.snowflake.com and search for your city. It should be there. If not, reach out to us and maybe we create a new chapter for you. So please let us know if we can be of any help. And yes, for some of you who asked about training and certifications, we are going to be providing a free, absolutely free of cost training workshop for all of you. You will get a hands-on batch once you've successfully completed this workshop. We call this Snowflake Ascent. It's run by our education services team. We're going to be doing this virtually on 8th of December. We'll send out an invite to all of you, so you don't have to worry about it. But just in case, if you want to grab that QR code, it's right here. It's for the entire region. If you're joining from, so if you want to join from Singapore or from Japan and you feel that the Australia, New Zealand time zone is going to suit you, please join that. If you're joining from India or from Sri Lanka, you can join the India time, and we'll have a fun day. So that being said, this has been absolutely wonderful. We are now going to take let's say a 10-15 minute break, because we've been going on all the way from the morning. We've been talking about native apps. We've talked about iceberg tables. We've talked about Snowpark container services. So let's take a breather. Let's be back in another 15 minutes, 2 o'clock India time. Let's be back. If you're joining us from Singapore, that is going to be 4:30 p.m. Or if you're joining us from Sydney, which I'm assuming you're not. So joining us from Sydney, that's 7:30. And if you're from Korea, Seoul, that'll be 5:30 p.m. for you. So we'll see you in another 15 minutes. Let's take a short break and let's play a video.